Welcome to Faith Wonders, where real stories of faith and miracles come alive from around the world.
From a proud leader who once lifted his gun to the face of the Virgin Mary, now lies only a broken man, pale, trembling, his head carved open to keep him alive. This is his story, and it begins in a quiet village in Southeast Asia. In a forgotten corner of a Southeast Asian countryside, where the river bends like a sleeping snake and rice fields glimmer under the sun, there lies a village once known for its harmony. Every dawn, the drum from the pagoda echoed across the valley, and soon after, the bell from the small Catholic church answered it. Two sounds, two souls rising together toward heaven. For generations, the villagers had lived as one. The pagoda people and the church people shared the same wells, the same markets, the same laughter of children chasing buffalo through the fields. No one asked who prayed to which god. It simply didn't matter. But peace, like rice paper, tears easily. It began, as evil often does, not with violence, but with whispers. "They are not loyal," someone murmured one afternoon at the tea house. "They say their priest tells them not to worship the spirits. That's an insult to our traditions." The murmurs grew into talk. The talk grew into suspicion. And suspicion, like a seed dropped into wet soil, began to grow roots in people's hearts. By the time the elders noticed, the old friendship between the pagoda and the church had already started to crumble. At the heart of that change stood Tuan lay. At 34, Tuan was everything a young man of the village dreamed of becoming: confident, respected, and feared. He was the secretary of Youth Union in Hamlet 7 and the head of the cultural committee. People listened when he spoke, and when he raised his voice against the church, no one dared to challenge him. "We are the sons of this soil," he would declare during meetings. "Our culture is pure. Our gods are ours. We cannot let outsiders corrupt it." Outsiders. That's what he called the Catholics, even though most of them were born right there in the village, just like him. To Tuan, the world was simple. You were either with us or against us. He began organizing small groups of young men, restless boys with too much pride and too little wisdom. They called themselves the Red Banners. They wore red armbands, painted slogans on bamboo boards, and marched through the dusty roads chanting, "One culture, one people." At first, it looked harmless, almost like a parade. But soon the chants grew louder, harsher. And one day they stopped in front of the small white church at the edge of the rice fields. "This is not their land," someone shouted. "Their God doesn't belong here." Inside, Father Joseph, an aging priest with gentle eyes, was praying the evening rosary. He heard the voices outside. He didn't look up. He simply whispered, "Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they do." From that day, the village began to split in two. The market stalls divided, Catholics on one side, pagoda followers on the other. The children, once playing together, now fought over invisible lines. Even weddings and funerals became separate. It was as if two villages had been drawn on the same map. Same soil, same people, but hearts worlds apart. Tuan thrived in the chaos. The local officials praised his energy and commitment to national unity. They gave him a small salary, invitations to district meetings, even gifts. He liked the feeling of power, the applause, the fear in people's eyes when he passed. He told himself it was all for the good of the village. He was protecting tradition, defending culture, saving people from false beliefs. But the truth was simpler. Tuan loved being obeyed. His wife, Mai, saw the change before anyone else. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and devoted to their 3 small children. At night, when Tuan came home with the smell of alcohol and cigarette smoke clinging to his clothes, she would whisper, "Tuan, since when did protecting our faith mean hurting others?" He didn't answer. He just looked away, eyes hard as stone. "You don't understand," he said once. "If we don't stand up, they'll take everything from us." Mai stayed silent, but in her heart she feared something darker than she could name.
The red banners grew bolder. They started walking around Catholic homes at night, banging on the gates, shouting insults, throwing rocks at windows. The police looked the other way. The village chief smiled and called it a cultural initiative. And when some villagers complained, their shops mysteriously lost customers. Fear replaced friendship, and hate began to wear the mask of righteousness. Still, Tuan told himself he was doing the right thing. He saw himself as a hero, a man defending his people from invisible enemies. But deep down, somewhere beneath the layers of pride and propaganda, his conscience whispered like a ghost. He ignored it. Every time that inner voice spoke, he silenced it with another drink, another order, another march. Evil rarely announces itself. The narrator's voice echoes softly. It comes dressed as loyalty, as pride, as love for one's people. And by the time we recognize it, it has already taken our soul. The final crack appeared one stormy evening when a group of Catholics repaired a small statue of the Virgin Mary in their courtyard. The statue was simple, hand-carved from local stone, her eyes gentle, her hands open in prayer. To the faithful, she was a sign of comfort. To Tuan, she was a challenge. From that night onward, he couldn't stop thinking about it, about her, about how her white face seemed to shine even under the rain. He felt mocked by her calmness, by the quiet faith of those he despised. "They worship idols," he told his men. "Let's show them who truly rules this village." They nodded, drunk on anger and loyalty. The plan was set, and somewhere in the darkness, as thunder rolled over the rice fields, the first echoes of a sin that would change everything began to rise. He thought he was defending his people. The narrator's voice whispers as the screen fades to black. But he was only preparing his own fall.
Tuan Lei's rise was quiet at first, like dry grass catching an unseen spark. Within a few months, his name was on every tongue in the district. The local officials loved him. They called him Comrade Tuan, the cultural guardian, the voice of the people. They gave him banners, titles, envelopes, and applause, all the little gifts that make a man believe he is doing something great. And Tuan believed it. He began to wear his red scarf even at home, his chest swelling each time he caught his reflection. He had become someone who mattered, someone the village feared. At meetings, he spoke of purity, tradition, and loyalty. He said their land was sacred, their culture divine, and anyone who followed a foreign god was betraying the ancestors. People clapped. Some believed him. Most were simply afraid not to. At night, Beneath the old banyan tree near the river, the red banners gathered around a flickering oil lamp. They were boys, too young to have seen war, too poor to dream of leaving the village. But under Tuan's voice, they felt powerful. "Brothers," he said, eyes gleaming, "we are the wall that protects our people. The priest and his followers want to erase our ways. We must stand firm." They nodded, their faces lit by the trembling light, their hearts swelling with the pride of belonging. They didn't see that the fire that united them was already consuming their souls. The campaign began with words. Pamphlets appeared overnight on doors and trees. "Protect our culture. No place for foreign gods." Then came mockery, whispers in the market, rumors about the priest. And when fear had done its work, the red banners moved to acts. They broke crosses from graveyards, smeared mud on statues, spat at the feet of the faithful as they walked to Mass. Tuan told himself it was just discipline, that fear was a tool to keep order. But deep inside, a part of him, small and trembling, knew he was crossing a line. He silenced it with drink and slogans. Father Lucian, the old priest, kept preaching peace. He never spoke Tuan's name. He only told his congregation, "We must pray not just for those who love us, but for those who hate us. For hatred is a sickness, and only love can heal the sick." Some villagers thought he was a fool, but others began to find courage in his calmness. They rebuilt broken shrines, relit candles, repaired what was destroyed. And to Tuan, it felt mockery. The local officials noticed the growing unrest. Instead of stopping it, they encouraged it. "Tuan," said the district secretary one afternoon, pouring him tea, "your work has united the people. Don't stop now. This country needs young men with fire." Fire. The word stayed with him. He didn't realize how literal it would become. One evening, the red banners gathered again, their faces glowing red under torchlight. The air smelled of rice wine and kerosene. A boy had news. The Catholics were rebuilding a small chapel on the edge of the fields near the river bend. They put up a new statue, a woman in white, the boy said. Tuan felt his jaw tighten. The Virgin again. Always her calm face, her quiet smile, her defiance. "She mocks us," he muttered. "Let's remind them whose land this is." That night, under a sky heavy with clouds, they went. 10 young men, half drunk, half afraid, their torches flickering in the wind. The fields glistened after the rain, their sandals squelching in the mud. When they reached the chapel, the air was thick with incense and silence. Inside, candles flickered around the small stone statue, the Virgin hands folded in prayer. Tuan hesitated for a moment. The others waited for his signal. Her face, pale, serene, seemed to look straight at him. He hated that look, the mercy in it, the pity. He said, "Break it." The first torch flew, hitting the altar cloth. It caught instantly. Another followed. The dry bamboo walls groaned, then flamed. Inside, wood cracked, glass shattered, and smoke rose into the night.
Someone laughed. Someone shouted, "Cleanse the village!" Tuan stood still, frozen between glory and horror. The flames danced in his eyes. He felt the heat on his skin, the power of destruction, the thrill of control. But beneath the roar of fire came another sound, small, stubborn, impossible, the faint ringing of a bell above the chapel door. Ding, ding, ding. Even as the roof caved in, it rang. Each strike fell like a heartbeat against his chest. For a second, he thought he saw her, the Virgin, standing within the smoke, her hands still folded, her face unburned. He blinked, and she was gone. By dawn, the chapel was nothing but black ash and silence. The district officials arrived, nodded, and called it an unfortunate accident. They praised Tuan's quick response in maintaining order. They promised a reward, but he couldn't look at them. When he raised his hands to light a cigarette, they trembled. When he closed his eyes, he saw fire. That night, Mai found him sitting alone outside, staring into the darkness. Her voice was soft. "Tuan, it's gone too far." He didn't answer. The crickets sang. The smell of smoke still clung to his clothes. "You can still stop before something worse happens." He turned to her slowly, eyes hollow. "It's already started," he said. "There's no stopping it now." Hatred, the narrator whispers as the screen fades to black, is a fire that never asks who it burns, and those who feed it always burn first. The smell of smoke still clung to Tuan's clothes long after the chapel burned. He washed them again and again, but the scent would not leave, as if the fire had sunk into his skin. In the village, fear had turned to silence. The Catholics no longer spoke above whispers. Their eyes dropped when Tuan passed by. And yet, beneath the quiet, something still lived. A faint, steady defiance, soft as a candle flame refusing to die. Every evening, small lights flickered before the ruins of the chapel. Someone had placed a cracked statue of the Virgin there, her face chipped, her robe blackened by smoke, yet her eyes, somehow, still shone. To the faithful, she was hope. To Tuan, she was an insult. He began to change. Sleep slipped away first, then appetite, then peace. He walked through the market, and people smiled, but their smiles were hollow. Children avoided his gaze. Even the dogs barked when he came near. At home, Mai hardly spoke. Their 3 children played in silence, as if afraid of breaking something fragile in the air. Sometimes, when Tuan stared out the window too long, Mai would whisper, "Tuan, maybe we should move away, just for a while." He never answered. Each night, the dreams came, the chapel burning again, but in the middle of the fire stood the Virgin, untouched. Her face glowed pale through the smoke, her eyes following him, not angry, not accusing, just sad.
He would wake drenched in sweat, gasping, his heart hammering. He'd pour another drink, tell himself it was only guilt, a trick of the mind, but deep inside, he knew something else was watching. Then came the whispers. Not the old whispers about the church, but new ones about him. People said the fire had cursed him, that when he walked past the chapel ruins, the wind carried voices calling his name, that at night a woman in white was sometimes seen standing outside his house. Tuan laughed it off at first, but laughter couldn't drown out the sound of fear, and fear, once inside, spreads like smoke through a locked room. One thick, humid evening, Tuan sat drinking on the veranda. The light flickered. Lightning danced in the distance over the rice fields like restless spirits. From inside the house came a small, trembling voice, his youngest daughter. "Daddy, I'm scared. There's someone outside." He frowned and stepped out into the night. The wind was still. The world was silent. And then he saw it. Across the dirt path, beside the old banyan tree, stood the statue, the same Virgin from the chapel, repaired and placed near the road by the Catholics. Under the moonlight, her pale face gleamed, her hands folded in prayer. It was only stone, but to Tuan, she seemed alive, and worse, forgiving. Something inside him twisted. By the next week, his temper was uncontrollable. He shouted at meetings, accused villagers of betrayal, slammed his fist when people hesitated to obey. "They're rebuilding the chapel," he barked. "The priest is defying the government. Do you all want this village to rot?" The others looked uneasy. Even his most loyal followers were growing tired. Finally, one muttered, "We've done enough, Tuan. Let it go." Tuan's hand struck the table. "It's not enough until they bow." That night, he opened the old drawer where his father's pistol lay, a relic from the war. He loaded it slowly, one bullet at a time. Each click echoed like a heartbeat. He caught his reflection in the barrel, pale, hollow-eyed, haunted. He barely recognized himself. Outside, the wind was rising. The air tasted of rain and something like iron. He walked alone to the edge of the village. The world was black, silent except for the chorus of crickets in distant thunder. The statue waited beside the road, calm, unblinking, eternal. Tuan raised the gun. His hand trembled. He wanted her to move, to speak, to do something, anything. But she only stood there, quiet, sorrowful, still. "You think you're better than me?" he whispered. "You think you can forgive me?" Thunder rolled. He clenched his jaw. Bang! The shot tore through the night. A piece of the statue's face shattered. A white fragment fell into the mud. But one eye remained, staring at him, unbroken. He fired again, and again. Each bullet a scream, a denial, a desperate prayer for silence. When the gun finally clicked empty, Tuan fell to his knees, shaking. Rain began to fall, sudden, cold, relentless. It washed over the broken statue, over the mud, over him.
Lightning split the sky, turning the field white for an instant, and in that light he saw her face, half destroyed, half whole, still looking at him, not with vengeance, with pity. He dropped the gun and screamed, but the thunder swallowed his voice.
By morning, the villagers found the statue, scarred, half-faced, but still standing. Her hands remained folded in prayer. No one saw Tuan that day. He went to the district office, pale and trembling, muttering that he had been testing his weapon. The officials nodded, but avoided his eyes. Even they felt the chill that followed him like a shadow. When he returned home, Mai met him at the door. His clothes were soaked, his face hollow. She touched his arm gently and whispered, "What have you done?" He said nothing, just stared at her, as if she were disappearing before his eyes. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every rumble of thunder became the crack of his gun. Every flash of lightning revealed her, the Virgin's single remaining eye, watching.
Days passed. He stopped attending meetings, stopped eating, stopped speaking. The red banners scattered, ashamed and afraid. No one mentioned his name anymore. Even the officials who once praised him now crossed the street when they saw him coming. He had become a ghost among the living, a man consumed by something no one could see. One evening, Mai found him standing at the window again, staring into the darkness. His lips moved soundlessly. She thought he was praying, but when she leaned closer, she heard the words. "She's still there," he whispered, "watching me." She looked outside, but there was nothing there. Only the rain falling soft and endless on the road where the statue once stood. When a man wounds what is sacred, the narrator's voice returns, quiet and grave. He does not destroy it. He only opens a wound inside his own soul, one that no fire, no power, no prayer can ever heal.
From that night onward, Tuan was no longer the same man. He stopped shaving. He stopped attending meetings. He stopped pretending that the world made sense. People said they sometimes saw him wandering along the rice fields before dawn, barefoot, muttering to himself, or kneeling before the ruins of the chapel, whispering words no one could hear. The villagers had grown used to the strange and the cruel, but something about Tuan frightened even the fearless. It was not madness they saw in his eyes. It was emptiness. Mai tried to save what was left of her family. She begged the local officials for help, for medicine, for understanding. They told her to be patient. They said her husband needed time. But when she left the office, she heard them whispering, "That's what happens when you offend the holy things." At home, her 3 children grew silent and thin. The eldest, barely 10, once asked, "Mom, why does Dad cry when he sleeps?" Mai couldn't answer. At night, when the house was quiet, she heard him talking to someone in his dreams, sometimes pleading, sometimes shouting, sometimes weeping like a child.
The monsoon season came early that year. Rain pounded the village for days, flooding the paths and fields.
The air smelled of damp soil and decay. On the 11th of April, Tuan received an invitation, a meeting of the Homeland Association in the nearby city. He hesitated at first, but the promise of old friends, free drinks, and laughter was too strong to resist. Mai watched him iron his shirt. The first time in months he cared about his appearance. She wanted to stop him, to beg him not to go, but something told her it was useless. As he left, she whispered, "Be careful, Tuan." He didn't turn back. That night, the party was loud and bright. Men toasted each other with rice wine, their voices echoing through the hall. Tuan smiled, laughed, even danced. For a moment, he felt alive again. But when the music faded and the hall emptied, he found himself standing alone outside, beneath the city lights that shimmered like false stars. The air was heavy, and the world seemed to tilt slightly, as if something unseen had shifted. He felt dizzy. The laughter of his friends now echoed somewhere far away, and in the distance he thought he saw a white figure watching him from across the street, still, silent, her face lost in shadow. He blinked. She was gone.
Tuan shook his head, climbed onto his old motorbike, and started the engine. The road home stretched long and wet under the rain. The headlights cut through the darkness like a blade. He rode fast, too fast, as if trying to outrun the ghosts chasing him. But the faster he went, the louder the voices became in his head. You destroyed her face. You mocked what is sacred. You thought yourself untouchable. He shouted over the wind, "Leave me alone!" The rain poured harder. The world blurred. And then, through the curtain of water, he saw something on the road ahead. A woman, white dress, barefoot, standing still. Tuan slammed the brakes. The tires skidded. The bike spun sideways, screaming across the wet asphalt. Metal crashed, bone cracked. Then, silence. When the villagers found him at dawn, his body was twisted beside the old wall at the entrance of the village, the same wall he had once painted with slogans of hatred. The motorbike lay crumpled like paper. His face was pale, his skull fractured, his breath as faint as a whisper. They rushed him to the hospital in the city. The doctors said the head trauma was severe, survival uncertain. They shaved his head, removed part of his skull to relieve the pressure on his brain. For days, he drifted between life and death, trapped in a twilight of pain and dreams. In the nights that followed, nurses swore they heard him speak in his sleep, in a low, trembling voice. Sometimes he mumbled prayers. Sometimes he called for someone named Mother. One nurse, a quiet Catholic woman, said she once heard him say, "Forgive me. I didn't know." And when she whispered, "Who are you asking forgiveness from?" he opened his eyes, cloudy, unfocused, and whispered back, "She's here." Then he smiled, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. Meanwhile, Mai sat by his bed every day, hands folded, lips moving silently. She had borrowed money from everyone she knew to pay the hospital bills. Her eyes were hollow from sleepless nights, but she never left. Sometimes she looked at the machines breathing for him and whispered, "If this is punishment, Lord, let it be enough." Their 3 children drew pictures of their father and pinned them on the wall beside his bed. Pictures of a man standing, smiling, holding their hands. But the man in the bed was not smiling. He was a shell, alive only by tubes and machines, his skull half covered by a thin white bandage. He had become what he once called others, broken, dependent, voiceless. Outside the hospital, the world went on as if nothing had happened. The red banners disbanded. The officials who once praised him avoided his family. Even the village that once feared his name now spoke it only in whispers, as a warning. "That's what happens," old women said, "when a man lifts his hand against heaven."
Weeks passed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mai dozed off beside his bed. The room was quiet, except for the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. Then, slowly, Tuan's fingers moved. Just a twitch, but enough to wake her. She leaned closer, heart racing. His lips were moving. She bent down and heard him whisper, "I saw her." Her voice broke. "Who, Tuan? Who did you see?" He turned his eyes toward the window, where the last light of day glowed gold and soft. His lips trembled. "The lady in white. She was smiling." And then, as tears streamed down his face, he whispered one last time, "She forgave me." The machines beeped steadily, then slowly, quietly, stopped. The nurse entered moments later and found Mai kneeling beside the bed, her hands over his chest, her face pressed against the sheets, whispering a prayer that was part grief, part relief. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky over the city cleared for the first time in weeks. And somewhere far away in that same forgotten village, the wind passed gently through the rice fields, brushing against the half-broken statue of the Virgin. Her single surviving eye caught the light of dawn, and for just a moment, it seemed as if she was smiling too. The wages of hatred are never victory, but ruin and silence. Yet even in ruin, mercy waits, patient as the morning sun after the storm. The day after the funeral, the rain began again. Not the violent kind that tears down roofs and drowns the fields, but a soft, endless drizzle that wrapped the village in mist, as if heaven itself was mourning quietly. Mai stood by the small grave behind their house, her black dress soaked, her children clinging to her hands. There was no band, no banners, no speeches, just the sound of rain falling on the clay. The villagers watched from afar. Some crossed themselves, some bowed silently, None dared to speak. Tuan's grave was simple, a wooden cross, no name, no title. The same hands that once held a hammer of destruction were now dust beneath the soil he had once tried to claim for himself. After the burial, silence settled upon the house like fog. Mai sold their last pig to pay off the hospital debt, then began weaving mats at night for the market. Her fingers bled, but she didn't stop. 3 mouths still needed feeding. At first, the children cried for their father every night. Then less and less. Soon his name became something whispered in dreams, a ghost that drifted through the walls of memory. But Mai could not forget. Every morning, before the sun rose, she walked to the ruined chapel. The statue of the Virgin still stood there, broken, scarred, one eye missing, yet somehow serene. Mai would kneel before it, place a single jasmine flower at its feet, and whisper, "Thank you for taking him gently."
One day, she found Father Joseph there, sweeping the courtyard. He was older now, thinner, his hair silver, but his eyes still held that calm that once unnerved Tuan, a calm born not of pride, but of forgiveness. He looked up and said softly, "Peace be with you, Mai." She bowed her head. "Father, do you think God forgave him?" The old priest leaned on his broom. "Forgiveness is not a trade, child. It is a light, and sometimes it shines even on those who cannot see it." Tears welled in her eyes. "He did terrible things." Father Joseph smiled sadly. "And still, Christ carried his cross for men who mailed him. That is mercy. It cannot be earned, only received." For the first time in the years, Mai felt warmth spread through her chest. Not joy, not relief, but something softer, like the slow unfurling of dawn after a long storm. Months passed. The village, once divided by hatred, began to heal in small, quiet ways. Children played together again in the fields. The market stalls no longer kept invisible boundaries. Even the pagoda bell and church bell began to sound together at dawn, 2 voices of the same heart. People no longer spoke of pagoda people and church people. They spoke instead of harvests, weddings, weather, simple things that once held the world together. And sometimes, in the evenings, old men sitting at the tea house would whisper about Tuan Le, not with anger, but with sorrow. They said, "He was not born evil. He just forgot who his neighbor was." One afternoon, a group of Catholic youths came to rebuild the chapel. They cleared the weeds, repaired the roof, and repainted the walls with lime as white as new rice. When they reached the broken statue of the Virgin, they hesitated. Should they replace it? But Mai stepped forward. "Leave her as she is," she said quietly. "She is beautiful like this, broken but still standing." They understood, so they cleaned the cracks, washed the moss from her robe, and left her one eye untouched, a witness to what had been. That night, the moon rose full over the village. Mai sat outside with her children, telling stories, not of hatred, but of courage, kindness, and second chances.
Her eldest asked, "Mom, was Dad a bad man?" Mai looked at the stars. The question cut through her like a blade, but she didn't flinch. "He was a man who forgot how to love," she said slowly. "But before the end, he remembered again." The children were silent for a moment. Then the youngest whispered, "Did God love him too?" Mai smiled through her tears, "Especially him." As the years passed, the village changed. The roads were paved. New houses rose along the river. Tourists came sometimes, taking pictures of the old church and the statue that still bore its scars. Father Joseph passed away peacefully one spring morning. At his funeral, the entire village came. Buddhists, Catholics, even those who prayed to nothing at all. For the first time in decades, everyone stood side by side. And when the bell tolled, the sound rolled across the fields, mingling with the echo of the pagoda drum, like the voices of the dead and the living singing together. Many years later, on a morning of golden light, a young woman arrived at the chapel with a small bouquet of white lilies. She placed them at the foot of the Virgin and whispered, "For my father." It was Tuan's daughter, grown now, radiant, gentle like her mother. She touched the cold stone of the statue and said softly, "I've forgiven you." A breeze moved through the courtyard. A single petal from her bouquet fell, and for a moment, it looked as if the statue, the scarred, one-eyed Madonna, was smiling again.
In the end, no one in the village remembered the slogans, the meetings, or the marches. They remembered instead a woman's quiet faith, a priest's forgiveness, and the lesson written in the cracks of an old statue. Faith is not built by power. The narrator's voice returns, soft as wind through the rice, but by mercy. And mercy begins when we stop asking who is right and start asking who needs love. As the screen fades, the camera pans over the village, children laughing, bells ringing, the same river glimmering like a silver ribbon. And in the final frame, the statue of the Virgin stands beneath the rising sun, still cracked, still incomplete, yet shining.